All right, here's some suggestions for some things that you might want to do. I've shortened some of your variable names once we get down here just to make it easier to find things. So for your descriptives, like things you might want to have a mean and a standard deviation for, I played around with your data a little bit. And for example, like one of your questions that you asked is, on average, how many times a day do you check social media? Let's do frequency tables. And if you do this, one thing that you'll find that's really interesting is your mean was 28.618, but your standard deviation was 40. Which is pretty huge. So basically, you had students who answered everything from 2 times a day to 180 times a day. So this is definitely something you could comment on about. There is such a range in what students reported that it's hard to really get any good usable data like that from this particular variable. And this is the breakdown of how many times different students said what. So you can see that you had about 11%, almost 12% of your students that said that they check social media at least 100 times a day. And then you had, some down here that said 10 times, things like that. But so you could play around with some of these numbers if you wanted to do some grouping and maybe do, people who checked it less than 5 a day, people who checked it 5 to 10 times a day. So you could maybe play around with that some. You also, just to use a simple example down here with age, so that's what this would look like. So you had a mean age of 22.647 with a standard deviation of 4.97. And then here's your table breakdown of how many people were what age. So that's a basic doing like your mean and your standard deviation. So now let's get into actually reporting some of your correlations. So you would want to think about pairs. So looking through some of your ideas, I thought that maybe if you did a correlation, and to do that we come over here to regression and correlation matrix. And so now it's going to only narrow down which variables are in a format that you're going to be able to do this, right? And I always put flag significant correlations just because it makes it easier to see. So let's say that we maybe want to look at people who say they use social media to stay connected with friends and family, and in general, those who say that they feel that they're more connected to others with social media, right? We would expect these two to be correlated, and they are. And you would need to explain what it means that it's a negative correlation. But we know that these two variables are correlated. Now maybe let's look at something that wouldn't be as positive. Let's look at some of these like negative self-esteem points, right? I'm dissatisfied with some element of my life. I feel optimistic and hopeful. I feel useless. I feel like a failure. I have a positive attitude about myself. And I generally feel good about my self-esteem. So let's use some of these. And you can see that within these, there's some correlations, which we would expect, right? We would expect there to be some correlation within the self-esteem measurements. But now maybe let's add in some things like I compare my body type to what I see on social media, and I compare my lifestyle to what I see on social media. And let's maybe see, I follow it for fashion ideas and workout tutorials. So let's go with this. So now when we come down here, what you'll see is we do have some positive correlations between things like I compare my body type on social media and I'm dissatisfied with some element of my life. That's pretty huge that you have a significant correlation there, right? You can do a lot of dialogue about what this could mean. Same thing, I compare my lifestyle and I'm dissatisfied with some element of my life. So we see that these two in particular are correlated with the idea of being dissatisfied with some element of life. We can come down here and we see that there's a correlation between using social media for fitness ideas and workout and feeling optimistic and hopeful, and that's a negative correlation, so that could be really interesting to dialogue about. And here's your p-value right here. So your Pearson's R, remember, is the strength of your correlation, and your p-value is how statistically significant it is. So this could be an interesting one to discuss And it looks like those are the main ones within this category of a few more over here that were statistically significant. But so that's how you'll want to do this, is just go through your variables and think logically, what things do I think might be related? And find those relationships. And then this is how you actually use the software for that. So if there's anything else you need me to clarify, please let me know. I'll have some time to work on this tomorrow for you if there's anything else you need help with.